Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, I wanted to talk about a different brand of paper as well as paint a Tonalist Landscape painting on it. I'm just going to give a little bit of background real quick before we start painting. This fluid watercolor paper, it comes recommended from a friend. There's a gentleman that we watch on Instagram that does plein air painting in gouache, and I believe he uses these pads. And it's marketed as feeling and acting like 100% cotton. However, it is paper pulp. I don't really do any plein air painting at all, but this was sub $10, this pad for 15 sheets on Amazon, so I figured it was worth just trying it out. And from there, it being 6x8, if you were to paint on it, you'd be able to easily mat it underneath a 5x7, which would probably be about here to here. And with its size, it would probably really be great for plein air painting. I don't really do much plein air painting, but compactness, I think, is key for that. I really don't do any plein air. It's been a few years. Down here with the temperatures in Louisiana, with the wet painting that I do, it dries so quickly before I can even get my initial pigment in. But that's something to look into down the line. So let's see. How do I even want to start this? Do I want to wet the paper? Let's go with the flow. Let's go back and forth. I'm not going to use a hake. Maybe I'll use a hake at some point. I'm just going to grab a squirrel mop. I'm going to grab some burnt umber that was left on the palette, and then we'll play around color-wise after that. So I want to create my scene. I feel like if you were to paint like Alan Owen, Edward Wesson, and others, this would be a great paper for you. Like just initial, the way I'm approaching it. I'm not really too up on the up and up with block paper, but should help prevent buckling, it being glued down essentially around all sides. I end up just doing a complete coat of that pigment and I'll pull my scene out from it. A little bit different than my approach where I'll completely saturate my paper and then put my pigment in. But if I do wind up doing plein air painting, like I said, I'll need a different approach because of that drying time. If you use gouache, that would help you mimic the handling of oils with the quick drying time. Maybe that'll be an experiment as we go through this pad. Also seeing how it handles just my back and forth addition and subtraction. We just recently had the Giant Omelet Festival. I think I had talked about that in previous videos. So I was doing a lot of preparation for that since I had a booth. And now I feel I could actually relax and get more painting in. We might stay just within burnt umber. So I know one of the issues of plein air painting is that there's a desire to bring out just a whole bunch of tubes and a whole bunch of different paints and equipment and brushes. And it's probably best to find a very simple setup. This squirrel mop is number 10 silver Atelier squirrel blend. I think I got it off of Blick. The gentleman on Instagram, who I believe is Mr. Tim, I'll just use that name and go with it, and then if I need to correct in the comments down below, I will. He uses a fan brush. So getting into, if I was, like I said, if I was to get into plein air painting, I want to minimize my tools. I think a lot of people use the Gorilla plein air painting boxes. I have I think the brand is the Seneca plein air box or pochade box, but I use that as just a simple table easel for oils. Maybe that'll be an experiment one day too, just seeing how this sits in kind of the catches of that pochade. Okay, so like I said, a lot of this experimental back and forth. I could see some buckling and waving of the paper. I don't think it's that much of an issue. It's definitely not affecting the flow of the paper. If we're super saturated, we may get puddles in different spots. I do wonder if it would even allow the paper to even get that wet if you were outside. Also, it not being cotton, I usually use the Stonehenge Aqua, and I use the sheets of that. So I can't say if it does or doesn't handle like cotton. I could only say that it is so far not handling like the Stonehenge Aqua. So I'm experimenting with different cotton papers like Arches and who else? Yeah, Arches, Winsor Newton, Canson, Strathmore. Experimenting with all the different brands, it felt like there was a difference between it. One thing that I liked a lot before I even started the camera, and I didn't mention, is that the texture, or essentially the weave of the pattern of the paper, doesn't really seem repetitive, and I like that. Sometimes it's nice to see that texture there, but to have that variation in it, which it has that variation there. And I was mentioning how just amongst cotton paper you have a lot of differences from brand to brand. We're gonna have to scrape and see how it handles that. I have some tools from Mr. Mark, a gentleman who had sent me some different supplies. These are handmade by him, where you can use the round edges. I find different paper scrapes differently, so just kind of playing around. You can of course use your fingernail, or palette knife. So I'm just using the back of my fingernail at this point for this background part. It's having a little bit of difficulty handling scraping from different tools. I had done so much prep for the Omelette Festival that my art desk is just in shambles, and some of my tools are probably falling behind the desk. I'm gonna have to look around in a bit. See how well it handles that. This is just getting aggressive with the scraping. All right. I have a razor blade. If you do use a razor blade, of course, be careful with it. If you go wet and wet, it usually kind of pulls up in a weird fashion. And you could get different techniques scraping over dried. So this is just wet scraping right now. I'm just looking for shortcuts with this paper and minimal tools for illusion of detail or soft effects. Of course, if there's anything you would like to see with this paper, let me know down below, because I have a whole pad of it. One of the things that might help is painting from a photograph and seeing how quickly we can build up some semblance of that. Because here I am just making up a scene on this pad of paper, which I keep on just saying I think that it's just for plein air painting. And if I'm going to make up imaginary scenes on it, probably working against that aspect. Though, if you were maybe to go on vacation and just be in a hotel room at night and you wanted to just sketch and paint, you can bring this with a little lump of burnt umber and a brush. Just weaving this softness in the fog in and out. We'll hit it with the blow dryer. It's not going to simulate drying out in nature, but we'll use it right now. So I'm going to pause the camera. All right, so this is just a hypothesis, but blow dryer combined with the curler or the wet caused this sheet to release. Once again, out and about, you wouldn't be using a blow dryer. So I'm going to clamp this down for the remaining of this painting, just to keep it flat. But that being said, the buckling doesn't feel too bad. There's two ridges right here, but I've had other paper that has buckled a lot more. Excuse me, sorry. Let's grab burnt umber. So far we haven't played with any other type of brush, and I think that's fine. I had grabbed a few just in case I wanted to grab some different ones to experiment with, but that'll probably be as we go through this pad. So I'll probably just call this a series of paintings. series of experiments with the fluid watercolor paper. Initially with the squirrel mops, I didn't like that mark that I had made in the beginning, and then just one day it hit me, duh, just that round easy top of a tree. Here's the razor blade. And a paper towel. So you can use the razor blade to scrape back to the white of the paper as well. Joe Menza has been just rocking the rocks in his foreground. I need to talk to him more about his approach. And it's about time me, him, and Matthew do another video chatting about art supplies or just art techniques. I had really just a lot of positive feedback. I think it'd be fun if the three of us were to get maybe the same paper, play around on it, or paint the same scene and then talk about it. With some papers, I feel like after that scraping, I have a hard time painting over it. With this application, I'm not having any issues. So even though initially I felt like it was very hit really hard with the scraping, it does still seem to have life in it, the paper. Now, considering we're staying within one brush, let's use this squirrel mop. With a light hand, which I always talk about, which I don't have, you can get some pretty thin lines out of these. Some good calligraphy type strokes. Maybe find a really good Chinese bamboo brush that has a lot of spring to it and a thin edge and tip. I'm using the same mark, but to represent leaves as opposed to the tops of trees. So maybe changing the apex, the top of the rounding, help us there. I watched this one video. I played around with the alternative photography techniques, and I really enjoy that, and I want to do some more darkroom stuff now that that festival's done with. But I watched a lot of wet plate photography, and there was a gentleman in a YouTube video who hiked all the way up in the mountains, I guess, and did a wet plate on location, or it might have been just a using a plate as the negative. But regardless, there was a certain scene that he had wanted in a certain time of day, and he went all the way into that location to get those two photographs. And I think about hiking and all the supplies that you might originally have, and then what you would take with you on top of that just for the purpose of painting and for photography. I don't think plein air painting was really in vogue until like the Impressionists, even though there was a lot of on-site painting and note-taking before that. I think Turner would just have like 2 or 3 colors and maybe have a small, like really small pad that would be in his hand. But that might be something you enjoy, especially with the cooler weathers, and then maybe preparing for the summer weather. Going out, kind of developing a technique that works for you. And then from there, getting ready for the hotter weather, making sure you're hydrated, seeing the changes in your approach that have to take place due to warmer weather and drying times. Once again, this is all just a quill brush painting, and not a fancy, expensive one. And we're just using burnt umber. So maybe this would be something that would be done on scene, on site, and then brought back and embellished in the studio. Alright, I'm going to hit it with the blow dryer again, and then we'll see if there's anything else we can do with this. Yeah, Percy. I think the rapid drying with the blow dryer is what causes it to curl up and pull off of that, because it only happens during that time frame. Alright, so just being at home, I'm just going to clip this other side. Alright, so I guess part of this, like I said, is just kind of thinking towards plein air painting and possibilities that you can just keep in mind, or maybe things that I'm going to try out. So with the whites, we have our paper towel, and I'm sure we could take our water and kind of rub back and scrub back if need be, or soften edges, which that's working. Getting a little bit of pilling, but not too much of an issue. I did kind of stain that one spot there, but it's all about experimenting and, you know, learning and coming up with stuff. That's the main idea. So scrubbing out spots. I remember watching Stephen Cronin taking a little bit of water, adding it to locations, or kind of scrubbing with a brush, and then lifting to add white back to that spot. It's not a technique that I use often, but it's a really effective technique. So you can do that. In our heavily applied areas, let's see. Yeah, we can change our tonal values there. You could bring white gouache with you, but that's another tube. Or maybe bring a dollop of it on whatever you're using as your palette, and just reconstituting it with water. Or the razor blade, you can scrape back to the white of the paper. This is going to give you the pure white of it. Excuse me, so it really depends on how far back you want to go with it. You can see that I did rough up and bring up the surface of the paper there. And then with the tonalist painting style, we do have like a lot of highlights and spots that we can have if need be. But if you just think about like theoretical painting and Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, we wouldn't have just such a bright light on a tree trunk because it's a vertical object compared to the sky, which is the source of the light. So it wouldn't be this bright. But for artistic approach and artistic license, you can do that. Sometimes you can get some white cuts into the paper, and that's just practice with the razor blade and catching the right angle. Are those showing up on the camera right there? Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's all a matter of what you prefer. And also just being careful if you're using a razor blade. Do it. Let's do some in the background. So between burnt umber, a scraping tool, a small pad of the fluid watercolor paper, razor blade, fingernail, paper towel. Really, we could just bring a small container of, I'm just trying to think of what you can carry that paint in. In the past I played around with the Altoid tins, so the Sucrete tins. So that might be a little plein air way to bring paint. And as you saw, I reconstituted it, so I didn't even use anything from the tube. So I think that should end our exploration here. We could take a look at it underneath a mat. We can then pull it off and see how the paper underneath is affected. And of course, we don't have any small mats readily available. All right, with movie magic, we can just pause it. And here's a little 5x7 opening. It's a little bit smaller than 5x7. That can give you an idea of what our results can look like. And of course, shift around and see what we like. You could even step down further to something that would be probably more 3x5 and see if there's individual parts that you like of the scene itself. So despite the small size, a lot of opportunity to really play around, experiment, and find what you like out of your resulting image. So we'll sign it. Of course, you are always welcome to follow along. If you have any questions, let me know down below. You have my express permission to sell anything you do whenever you follow along. I want you guys to be successful, have fun, and have art supplies. And of course, I have a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support this channel, please like, subscribe, follow, and check out the Patreon and the Etsy. I put up some new stuff on the Etsy, so check that out. We'll come back to this pad. We got 14 more pages of it. If there's things you'd like to see, let me know. Shape it a little bit, but there we are. All right, you all take care and have a great day. Bye.